now available in paperback. From the author of the critically acclaimed book The Man Crisis comes The Woman Crisis. Learn why so many women have become lost in their quest to have it all in The Woman Crisis. Get your copy of The Woman Crisis in paperback at Amazon.com and online booksellers today. Historical Men in Crisis. One of my viewers wanted me to do another installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series. And for this installment in the Historical Men in Crisis series, I'm going to be talking about Edmund Emil Kemper III, also known as the Co-Ed Killer. All images in this video are used under fair use of United States copyright law of 1976 and are used in conjunction with my commentary. Now, Edmund Emil Kemper III was known as the Co-Ed Killer, who murdered 10 people, including his mother and her best friend, in a series of serial murders that took place from 1964 all the way up to 1973. And Edmund Emil Kemper was on the road to becoming a man in crisis due to the fact that he was raised in an extremely dysfunctional home with an extremely domineering woman and a beta male father. And conditions in the home were so hostile due to Edmund Emil Kemper's mother that the father wound up leaving the home because he could no longer deal with the constant verbal abuse he received from his wife. Now, Clarnell Kemper was extremely upset because her husband worked a so-called menial electrician job, and Edmund Jr., the father of Edmund Emil Kemper III, said that suicide missions and wartime and atomic bomb testings were nothing compared to the abuse he suffered inside of the home where he was constantly arguing with his wife. And it was that home environment established by Clarnell Kemper that made the Edmund Emil Kemper on the road to becoming a man in crisis. And this boy wound up becoming a man in crisis, I believe, as related to the abuse he received by the mother, who was basically angry at Edmund Kemper Jr. And as she was angry with Edmund Kemper Jr., she took out all of her anger on his son. And this is something that commonly happens to many women who are just have unrealistic expectations for men. The men doesn't meet their standard, so they take out all of their anger on their sons, turning them into beta males who become on the road to becoming men in crisis. And Edmund Kemper III wound up becoming a man in crisis, and this led to him participating in extremely antisocial behavior, such as the torture of insects and animals, and that is a major indicator that a beta male will be an extremely violent person in the future. Now, that's what I believe happened with Edmund Kemper III, is that he was well on the road to entering what I call the secret world. And the secret world is a place where a beta male believes that they can express their natural masculinity and masculine behaviors without any sort of shame being inflicted on them by a domineering mother. So I believe Edmund Emil Kemper wound up starting on the road to entering the secret world at an early age due to all of the abuse he received from his domineering mother, his abusive older sister, who allegedly wound up trying to kill him on 2 occasions, one time pushing him in front of a moving train, the other time putting him in water until he almost drowned. And I believe that each of these events led to Edmund Kemper learning to hate women, and it's that hatred of women that I believe was the main motivation to leading him to participating in that series of murders as related to that murder spree he participated in from 1964 all the way up to 1973. Now, Edmund Kemper, basically as related to this abuse, wound up again not only participating in cruelty to animals, but he had a dark fantasy life where he performed disturbing rituals with his younger sister's dolls, such as removing their heads and hands. And he also told his older sister that if he had to kiss a teacher, he would have to kill them. Again, he would go out here and participate in these disturbing behaviors, such as getting his father's bayonet and going into his second grade teacher's house to watch her through the windows, extremely antisocial behaviors, and he also wanted to play games like gas chamber and electric chair, and pretending like he was being executed by gas inhalation or electric shock. So Edmund Kemper became an extremely antisocial person, and he was on his road again to becoming a man in crisis. And he wound up becoming devastated once his parents wound up divorcing in 1957, because the only person he had a close relationship with was his father. But his father basically could not take any of the abuse from his domineering, neurotic, and alcoholic mother, who verbally and emotionally abused him and also made him sleep in a locked basement out of fear that he would harm his sisters. And he was also mocked for his size, and people thought he was a weirdo. So a lot of people really did not want to be dealing with Edmund Kemper III. And even this woman just basically was just really a twisted woman. And again, she was so twisted that her abuse, along with the divorce of Edmund Kemper's father, this is what I believe led to Edmund Kemper really becoming even more twisted, because once the individual who gave Edmund Kemper stability left the family home, this is what led to Edmund Kemper basically becoming just as dysfunctional as the mother who taught him. And as Edmund Kemper was trying to get away from his mother's out-of-control behavior, he went to go live with his father in Van Nuys, California, but the father had already remarried and had a stepson, so he didn't want anything to do with the family that he had. So he sent Edmund Kemper to his grandparents and thought sending him to his grandparents would be a good thing. But the whole thing was that Edmund Kemper basically wound up in another abusive environment with another toxic woman like his grandmother, who he says was emasculating him and the grandfather. And as a result, this further led to more reasons that Edmund Kemper had to enter the secret world to express his anger towards women. And as he was frustrated and angry about always being emasculated and humiliated by female authority figures, Edmund Kemper exploded eventually in rage towards his grandmother. And after having an argument with his grandmother, he then got a rifle that his grandfather got him from hunting, and was out here, and the rifle had been confiscated from him because he was using it to shoot animals. And he went into the kitchen and murdered his mother. And then after murdering his mother, he then went and murdered his grandfather. And then after murdering his grandfather, this is where Edmund Kemper went out of the secret world and entered reality. And once he entered reality, he then contacted his mother, and it contacted his mother to let him know that what he had done. And that's when he wound up being committed to a mental health facility, Escalero State Hospital, where he wound up staying for several years. And as he was there, sociopathic Edmund Kemper III, basically, as I see it, manipulated many of the individuals in the facility. And this sociopath, as he was pretending to be a good worker and pretending to be able to be rehabilitated, basically was out here looking to manipulate people. And he manipulated people into making them think that he was not a threat to anyone. And as he did this, what he did was manipulate the people in the facility to allowing him to being released on parole on his 21st birthday. Now, on Edmund Kemper III's 21st birthday, he was released into the custody of his mother, and him being released into the custody of his mother basically started him further down the road to becoming a man in crisis. Now, while Edmund Kemper III was trying to get his life together, he basically wound up becoming further hampered by his mother, because he was continuing to have fights with her as he was trying to get his life in order. Now, Edmund Kemper hoped to become a police officer, but was rejected for his size because he was 6 feet 9 inches. However, he wanted to hang out with police officers because he liked seeing men who had power, and seeing these men having power, I believe, was the thing that drew him to these police officers, and wanted to hang out in places that police officers were going to, like a bar called the Jury Room. Now, Edmund Kemper, while he couldn't become a police officer, wound up getting a series of menial jobs before gaining employment with the state of California Division of Highways, and it was there that his whole life started to further deteriorate because he kept having arguments with his recently divorced mother, who was still having issues with men. And as she was still having issues with men, she was still taking it out on her son. And as she was out here emasculating her son, eventually Edmund Kemper got enough money to move to live in with a friend in Alameda. And sadly, Edmund Kemper couldn't get away from his mother because he did not know how to set boundaries as a man. And because he did not know how to set boundaries as a man, he often wound up having issues such as financial difficulties, which led to him frequently returning to his mother's apartment to continue having a codependent relationship with him. Now, as Edmund Kemper tried to move on, he met with a student who he became engaged with, and eventually the engagement broke off, basically because he wound up, I believe, becoming dominated by his mother. And as he was working with the highway division, he was hit by a car while riding a motorcycle he had purchased, and his arm was injured. So he filed a civil suit against the car driver, and then eventually wound up getting a car that, as part of his settlement money, which looked just like a police vehicle at the time. So he bought this vehicle because this vehicle allowed him to emulate the police officers he admired because they had the power that he wanted to have. And he wanted to have that power, but he only believed the only place he could have that power was in the secret world. And as he felt powerless in his own personal life as related to his inability to build a life as a man, in the real world, he decided to enter the secret world. And as he entered the secret world, he started to notice a large number of young women hitchhiking. And then he started making plans to hurt these women because he wanted to hurt these women as related to his deviant sexual urges, because he wanted to go out here and finally feel like a man by getting even with the women in his life who hurt him in the past. So that's I believe was the motive for Edmund Kemper III participating in that series of murders. And he did not just start murdering all of a sudden. He built up to it, because most beta males, when they go out here and participate in their deviant behaviors and their violent behaviors, they start out by participating in innocuous behaviors, by going out here and picking up women like Edmund Kemper did, by picking up female hitchhikers and then letting them go. And he picked up over 150 women before he wound up acting on his deviant behavior. And this is something that beta males do because they want to build up the confidence to participate in their deviant behavior. Now, Edmund Kemper, between 1972 and 1973, wound up murdering 8 women. He would pick up these women as they were hitchhiking, take them to isolated areas where he would wind up taking their lives. And then after he took their lives, he would then go out here and perform deviant sexual acts with their bodies before going out and dismembering them. And the behaviors he participated in are so disturbing, I just don't want to describe them, but they are the kind of sick and depraved behaviors that beta males participate in, because beta males, their whole perception of sex is just extremely deviant and twisted. And it's deviant and twisted because these men do not love women. No, these men hate women, and they want to destroy a woman as they're participating in their deviant sex acts, because for them, their bodies are weapons, and they want to use their bodies as weapons to go out here and harm a woman. So once they believe they have taken their lives, they want to violate their bodies, and they want to go out here and destroy that woman That's all part of their whole deviant frame. And then after they participate in their deviant acts, what they do is then dispose of a woman's body like garbage because they want to keep their world smooth and they want to destroy any evidence of their deviant behavior. That is what Edmund Kemper III was doing as he was out here stalking these women who were hitchhiking and believing that they could go out here and just get a quick trip from point A to point B, but they weren't getting a trip from point A to point B. They were running into a monster, and this monster was just looking to destroy the lives of these women. And again, it was just really twisted because he basically thought that he was going to hurt. He thought he was doing something as related to sating his deviant behavior, but he was just an absolutely sick and depraved individual. And he was a sick and depraved individual who was out here looking to, again, destroy the lives of women. And again, just absolutely sick, a sick individual. And I don't really want to get too much into the details because the descriptions of what happened to these women, I wouldn't want to happen to any other woman out here. And what's really sick is that he just, again, had this whole thing where he wanted to just do all these deviant acts, and it just was just so sick. I just don't even want to even talk about any of the details. Now, things hit a head when Edmund Kemper then finally just had the courage to go out after his mother, and on April 20th, 1973, he decided to finally go after the woman who he had just all of the hatred for. And the woman he had all of the hatred for, his mother, he had so much rage towards him that after he wound up participating in murdering his mother, he then decapitated his mother, performed deviant acts with her head, and used it as a dartboard, and then put her head on a shelf and screamed at it for an hour, and then eventually, just did so many sick things. I mean, this man took out all of his rage on his mother in this explosion of anger. And then after this, he then went to Pueblo, Colorado, and I believe then went after his mother's best friend. Again, just an absolutely sick man. And again, he was just so sick. The things that he did, he deserves life in prison for. And if there ever is a place in hell for someone, it definitely is Edmund Kemper III. He is just an absolutely sick monster, and this sick monster, he deserves that place in hell when he leaves this earth, because right now he's rotting in prison for the rest of his life, and he's rotting in prison for the rest of his life because he was an absolutely sick person. But this sick boy wound up on the road to becoming a man in crisis. And again, he was a man in crisis due to the dysfunctional way he was raised by his domineering and emasculating mother. And when I look at Edmund Kemper III's story, it really tells me that if you have a domineering mother and you're a father, please get custody of your children, because if you don't get custody of your children, your sons are going to become a man in crisis, because that woman is going to take all of her anger out on him. And as she takes all of that anger out on him, she's going to look to destroy him, and because she wants to destroy you. And again, and when it comes down to these kind of women, they don't know what boundaries are. They don't know what space is. And that's what leads to their sons becoming psychotic sociopaths. And this is the third or fourth beta male that I've read about who had a domineering mother. And it looks like those domineering mothers basically lead to these boys becoming emasculated. And when these boys become emasculated, they believe the only way for them to take power is to hurt other women, because they have such hatred built up in them about other women. And because they have such hatred of women, they want to go out here and destroy those women's lives. I mean, Edmund Kemper III had such hatred for his mother and all of the screaming that she did that he cut out her vocal cords and put them in a garbage disposal. And again, this man was just absolutely enraged at his mother. And as he was enraged as his mother, he looked to take the lives of other innocent women. He looked to stalk innocent women. I mean, he was just a monster all around, and just an absolutely just sick and depraved individual. And again, this is the type of what happens with beta males, because they don't know how to navigate the world. They don't know how to socialize in the world. They don't know how to function in the world as a man, because they grow up at an early age learning dysfunction due to the toxic home that they grow up in. And when I read the story of Edmund Kemper, it just made me sick to my stomach, because this is the type of evil that I talk about in The Man Crisis in the chapters: the sexual frustration of the beta male, the sexual deviancy of the beta male. And the reason why that beta male is sexually frustrated and sexually deviant is because they don't know how to express their natural masculinity, and when they express it in the secret world, they express it in a way that makes them become violent sexual deviants. So when I read Edmund Kemper III's story, again, it was one of the sickest and most disturbing stories I ever read in my life. And it just made me hurt my heart to hear the horrors that this man participated in, because this wasn't a man, this was a monster, and this monster was nothing more than a man in crisis. And there was a historical lesson for everybody to learn about this guy, and that is, again, when you have a boy who has got a domineering mother, you have to watch out for him, because that domineering mother is going to make that boy not into a man, but she's going to make him into a man in crisis. Now, if you want to learn more about what makes beta males become sick and twisted and dysfunctional like Edmund Kemper, and how to stop it, you can pick up my book, The Man Crisis, on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find The Man Crisis at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me do more videos about historical men in crisis, you can send a donation to the PayPal or the Cash App. And if I know something about that person, I will make that video for you. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.